Hoy veremos.
Es una especie muy promisoria.
It is a very promising species. The farmers, the indigenous communities of the Department of Sucre, and a large part of the Caribbean region use it for different uses, which can be from the fruit of its fruits, as well as in handicrafts.
Frutos, como también en artesanías.
It is a very rich product, delicious, tasty, that we can find in many presentations, from sweets, jams, ice creams, and intoxicating drinks such as wines.
Como los vinos. Estamos en la subregión.
We are in the sub-region of San Jorge, Department of Sucre, in the southern zone, between the municipalities of El Roble and La Villa, or San Benito Abad.
Y La Villa o San Benito Abad. Cuenta con amplias campos bastante transformados para silvopastoril.
It has extensive silver pastoral fields for the breeding and raising of cattle. We are in an area where most of the fields were transformed long ago.
Campos fueron transformados hace mucho, tumbando el monte.
Laying down the mountain so that grass could grow and there was only livestock activity.
Allí se da bastante el corozo de lata.
There is quite a lot of Corozo de lata, Bactris guineensis, is a very promising species.
Las comunidades indígenas del departamento de Sucre.
The farmers, the indigenous communities of the Department of Sucre, and a large part of the Caribbean region use it for different uses that can be from eating its fruits,
como también en artesanías,
as well as in handicrafts. Its stems are used to make musical instruments.
Instrumentos musicales y también ampliamente usado para la construcción.
And also widely used for the construction of typical houses.
Bien, el uso del corozo es un uso milenario.
The use of Corozo is an ancient use. It has been widely used for many years to make wines, alcoholic beverages, and also for juices.
Y también para jugos. Cuando se elaboraban los jugos,
when the juices were made and they were fermented, they realized that it was an intoxicating drink for good aroma.
Aroma con un buen sabor. Y obviamente hoy la industria
for good flavor, and obviously today the industry of wines or alcoholic beverages based on Corozo are on the rise in the main cities of the coast, Sincelejo, Montería, Mompos.
El corozo de lata crece en estas zonas.
The Corozo de lata grows in these areas in a natural and wild way. The Corozo is a plant whose reproduction is sexual by fruits.
Pero una vez que ya está instalada la plántula,
but once it is installed, the seedling begins to grow and many shoots, substems, stems or stipes,
o tallos o estipes que comienzan a formar
which begin to form a clump, which is an individual like the one we see back here.
Unas 1,200 tallos por cada macolla, por cada mata. Esos tallos se entresacan y es...
These can even reach up to 1,200 stems per clump. For each clump, these stems are thinned out, and it is what the farmers use to build the walls of their houses and even to place them as support to the roofs of bitter palm here in the region. There are studies that show that this Corozo, this fruit, has a high content of antioxidants.
La industria alimenticia,
the food industry at the national level is beginning to realize that there is great potential here.
Hay registros bibliográficos donde se muestra que
because there are bibliographic records where it is shown that the Corozo has a high content of antioxidants, type anthocyanins, that are very stable because many fruits have these antioxidants, However, these antioxidants are very volatile and can be destroyed at high temperatures or at low temperatures.
Extracto de corozo se pueden conservar a altas temperaturas.
In the Corozo extract, they can be preserved at high temperatures, and even they can be maintained below 100 degrees Celsius, and over time it can last for 1 or 2 years. Also in the Corozo, the extract remains intact with more flavor. So the food industry caught their attention, not only because of the amount of antioxidants, but also for the exotic flavor.
Actualmente, las poblaciones naturales de corozo vienen siendo diezmadas.
Currently, the natural populations of the Corozo are being decimated. Unfortunately, the rancher has not understood that the Corozo can coexist happily with cattle. They can be mutually helpful, and effectively the Corozo benefits from the cattle because it serves as a dispersal mechanism of its seeds.
El corozo se beneficia del ganado porque sirve como un mecanismo de dispersión de sus semillas, y a la vez el ganado también
And at the same time, the cattle also in summer, in dry times, when the dry season arrives in our region,
seca llega a nuestra región, lo único verde que permanece en una finca es el corozo.
the only green thing that remains on the farm is the Corozo.
No solo el ganado.
The cattle take refuge there, and not only livestock. These Corozo plants are a natural refuge for all biodiversity, both fauna and flora of the Colombian Caribbean, and especially of the tropical dry forest.
En el interior de cada una de estas macollas podríamos encontrar fácilmente más de 300 especies.
Inside each of these clumps, we could easily find more than 300 species of animals of the Colombian Caribbean region, because it is a refuge, it is a protection that kills them or that the Corozo clump offers them naturally. Likewise, not only the fauna, but also the flora, as I said. The only green thing that grows is what is inside the mesh, because the farmer, the producer,
Comienza a quitar toda maleza, comienza a quitar toda planta.
begins to remove all the weeds, begins to remove all plants other than grass, and the only thing that ends up growing is inside the clumps.
Natural de reproducirse esta planta es a través de semillas.
The natural way to reproduce this plant is through seeds, and it is proven reproduction, which needs very important pollinators.
En algunos casos, en algunas fincas donde se utilizan muchos agroquímicos para eliminar.
In some cases, on some farms where many agrochemicals are used to eliminate weeds and herbicides to eliminate insects, it is seen that Corozo fruit production is very low because it needs specialized beetles for its reproduction for the fruit production.
Producción de frutos. Eso es una de las problemáticas que está enfrentando la palma de Corozo en el Caribe colombiano.
This is one of the problems that the Corozo palm is facing in the Colombian Caribbean, as well as slashing and burning, because the farmer, as I was saying now, it is very unfortunate that they did not understand that finally the Corozo can be in the same place, in the same plot together with the cattle.
Mi trabajo de maestría consistió en identificar algunas plantas.
My master's work consisted of identifying some plants that could have exotic potential in the food industry.
En la industria alimenticia. Consultando, llegando, recorriendo caminos, encontramos que
Consulting, arriving, traveling the roads, we found that on the Caribbean coast, in the department of Córdoba and Sucre, the Corozo has been taking place for a long time, and it is a fruit that has not been much of interest despite its wide use and its extensive commercialization.
La industria no había puesto los ojos en esta fruta. Entonces vimos el potencial.
The industry had not set its eyes on this fruit, so we saw the potential of using this plant to manufacture, to make food products based on Corozo, and today we have been positioning the Corozo at a national level.
Nos llamó la atención cómo el azaí, siendo una fruta muy parecida, de hecho de la misma familia Arecácea, del Corozo.
It caught our attention like the acai, being a very similar fruit, in fact from almost the same relatives of the Corozo. Corozo, for many connoisseurs, organoleptically, the flavour is much tastier than acai. It is much sweeter, it is bittersweet, but exquisite on the palate, with much more potential in the nutraceutical field. because it has those antioxidants that I mentioned a moment ago. With a high concentration of these antioxidants that allow them to be used for food and human nutrition.
Para la alimentación y para la nutrición humana. El corozo tiene una travesía que realmente termina incrementando un poco el costo, y el costo es alto porque el corozo puede estar subiendo.
The Corozo has a journey which really ends up increasing the cost a bit, and the cost is high because the Corozo can be going up from the much lower area of the Mahana region to Magange, or up to here San Benito Abad in a Johnson boat. These bundles of Corozos are transported by river. They reach those centers or ports, and from there they are transported to Sincelejo or Cartagena, where we begin to transform this fresh fruit into pulp.
En pulpa. A un costeño, cuando decimos pulpa de fruta de corozo, ellos quedan, ¿cómo? ¿Cómo sacan esa pulpa? Porque realmente es una fruta.
When we say Corozo fruit pulp from a coastal town, they say, how do they get that pulp? Because it really is a fruit that does not have pulp. They have an extract that is very attached to the seed, and the margin that gives us performance is very low. But we use special equipment to extract that pulp.
Aprendido desde nuestras abuelas, simplemente maceramos, escaldamos.
The process is very traditional, learnt from our grandmothers. We simply macerate, blanch the fresh Corozo, wash it, blanch it, transform it, put it through the machines, and then extract the concentrated juice. Really more than pulp, it is a concentrated juice, but with a few Brix degrees that complies with the regulations of INVIMA and the Health Institute.
Bueno, nosotros recibimos de diferentes partes del Caribe, recibimos la fruta en racimos, en gajos.
From different parts of the Caribbean, we receive the fruit in clusters, in segments. These clusters have already been identified and valued.
Con un sabor, con una concentración de grado Brix o con unos grados Brix de azúcares específicos. Entonces, una vez que ya están seleccionados, pasan al proceso de desgrane.
Which come with a coloration, with a flavor, with a concentration of Brix degrees, or with specific Brix degrees of sugars. Once they are selected, they go to the shelling process, and then to the washing process. The Corozo is washed, the fruit is washed, then it goes to a blanching process, and then descaling for 15 minutes. It goes directly to the machine that is going to crush the Corozo in order to obtain the Corozo extract. Once the extract is available, it is packaged in different presentations according to the client or according to the client's needs, and is transferred to the cellar or freezer to preserve. Then it is transported once the terminal-based product is already prepared. It is also transported in refrigerated trucks.
Transformamos el corozo en pulpas porque el corozo es una fruta muy perecedera, entonces es una fruta que no se puede almacenar por 5 o 6 días.
We transform the Corozo into pulp because the Corozo is a very perishable fruit. It is a fruit that cannot be stored for 5 or 6 days. The Corozo is harvested for 1 day in the collection centers. We receive it the next day and we transform immediately and we keep it cold. We do not use any preservative input or additional additive to maintain it. We do not use any preservative input or additional additive to maintain it, but we freeze it at -17, -18 degrees Celsius. We pack it in plastic tanks, or we pack it in jars or in bags, and those 3 kilo, 5 kilo bags. The cans are 20 kilos. We send them to the main cities of the country in refrigerated trucks.
Refrigerados que mantienen la temperatura de -18 grados y están allá disponibles todo el tiempo del año.
Which maintain the temperature of -18 degrees and are available there all year long. Because the mapping of the entire region allowed us to identify that perhaps in this area they are not producing at the moment, but in the area south of Bolivar or south of Cordoba, south of Sucre, it is producing. So when we begin to add up what comes to us from each of these collection centers, we decided to keep the volume stable all the time for our supplier, for our customers.
Para nuestros proveedores, para nuestros clientes. Cuando se abre la convocatoria en negocios verdes de la oficina de Carsucre, nosotros nos vimos muy identificados con la oficina.
When the call for green business from the Casucre office opens, we found ourselves very identified with the office and especially with the national project of the Ministry of Green Business.
Y encontramos que cumplimos los 10 puntos más.
We began to read what a green business is, and we found that we complied the 10 most fundamental points of a green business, and it is, one is part of the country's bioeconomy.
Pero nuestras prácticas llevan a que los cultivadores, los cosechadores, los capacitemos constantemente.
It is a business based on biodiversity, but our practices lead growers and harvesters to constantly train them in two fundamental things. One is in the conservation of the bush, the conservation of the Corozo clumps, and in the cuts of the bunches, because we know the important value, both ecological and economic, that it has for vulnerable and remote communities in the Department of Sucre and the departments of the Caribbean.
De los departamentos del Caribe. Entonces, el componente de Corozo, o el Corozo como componente desarrollador de las economías en los pueblos y en las veredas.
The Corozo as a developer component of the economies in the towns and in the most remote villages of the departments of Colombia is a component that must be kept an eye on, because we could suddenly be losing the opportunity to a good business and really become a stronger economy developer in the most vulnerable communities in the country.
Bueno, enfrentamos varios retos actualmente. Un reto grande, he mencionado y no me voy a cansar, es están diezmando las poblaciones naturales. Sin embargo, la producción es alta.
We currently face several challenges. A big challenge that I have mentioned, and I'm not going to get tired, they are decimating the natural populations. However, the production is high because there are some areas where they are very remote. It continues to be conserved, and fortunately this plant is a warrior. They cut it today, and after 2 years it is grown again, the same height and producing the same amount or even much more. The owner of the farm has to make a very high effort to be able to eradicate it from his farms. However, it is not a reason to rely. The owner of the farm has to make a very high effort to be able to eradicate it from his farms. However, it is not a reason to really eradicate it, because it can offer many more benefits to the rancher. That is one of the challenges we have to face, and that I believe we must join forces, many institutions, from corporations, from the ministry, to be able to generate those energies that are mentioned and strengthen them much more.
Que permita que los campesinos puedan acceder a estos recursos de una forma libre, de una forma segura y que realmente pueda permitirse conservar.
Which allows farmers to access these resources in a free, safe way, and that can really afford to preserve the Corozo over time. On the other hand, there are already people interested in planting. We already have contact in various regions in Magdalena, in the south of Bolivar, interested in us returning the seeds so that they can expand their crops.
Ampliar sus cultivos. Nosotros no hay nada estimado actualmente, es una palma nativa, es una palma que de pronto no se tiene un registro agronómico de cuáles son sus necesidades, sus requerimientos.
There is currently nothing estimated. It is a native palm. It is a palm that suddenly does not have an agronomic record of what its needs are, its nutritional requirements. However, we know that this plant can grow in low-lying areas in a very normal, very natural way, and we would believe that once these seeds are established, they would be or would serve to enrich already established crops.
De Corozo no sería muy económicamente viable, pero utilizar una parcela como esta, donde pueden estar más o menos unas 30 hasta 45.
To think of a Corozo crop, it would not be very economically viable, but using a plot like this, where there can be more or less 30 to 45 Corozo plants, they could continue to be enriched with seeds so they can grow and after about 5 or 6 years already be producing Corozo commercially.
Bien, el jugo de Corozo y todos los productos que tienen Corozo natural nos brinda muchos beneficios nutracéuticos. Hay referencias bibliográficas.
Corozo juice and all products that have natural Corozo provide us with many nutraceutical benefits. There are bibliographical references that show that Corozo juice extract has antioxidants such as anthocyanins, which help counteract neurodegenerative diseases. There are scientific studies that are already proven. The invitation is that this type of food can be used for our old age, and in our adult life we have fewer records of people with neurodegenerative diseases. In addition, that is a very rich, very delicious, very tasty product.
Delicioso, muy sabroso, que lo podemos encontrar en muchas presentaciones, desde dulces, mermeladas, helados, bebidas embriagantes como los vinos.
Which you can find in many presentations, from sweets, jams, ice creams, intoxicating drinks such as wines, Corozo-based craft beers, and Corozo-based soft drinks. The products that can be made with Corozo are very varied, and the idea is surely to position this fruit on national and international level.
Esta región sin el Corozo fue una región mucho más pobre, unas comunidades campesinas más empobrecidas. Yo recuerdo anécdotas en esos talleres que hemos estado haciendo.
The region without the Corozo would be a much poorer region, more impoverished farming communities. I remember anecdotes in those workshops that we have been doing, where entire families tell me, I bought this refrigerator with the 2000 Corozo, I bought this washing machine from the Corozo of 2005, and so on. One sees how the families that have access to this resource and that market end up generating income.
Gran parte del año, y que son las únicas fuentes de ingresos. Entonces,
much of the year, and that they are only sources of income. Our region is a fairly poor region. Our farmers unfortunately do not have the tools, they don't have the resources to undertake, but having and accessing this resource to this fruit has suddenly allowed them to have a stable income over the years.
A lo largo de los años. Corozo para mí es una de las frutas más exquisitas que se ha podido probar. Un jugo de corozo es exquisito, pero...
For me, the Corozo is one of the most exquisite fruits that has been tasted. A Corozo juice is exquisite, but beyond the juice, the plant itself is life, because it provides us with a refuge for flora, fauna.
Verde siempre, durante todo el tiempo, en nuestras sabanas, en nuestros bosques.
It allows us to suddenly have something green all the time in our savannas, forests, agroecosystems. It allows the farmer to suddenly have access to a resource that is easy, that does not require much expense or management costs. And that is always grateful because it is reproducing and producing more and more.
Produciendo cada vez más.